And in today's Business Matters, Republicans in Congress are expected to advance elements of a sweeping budget package this week. Many details are still being negotiated, but it would build on tax cuts passed during President Trump's first term that are due to expire this year. Other spending cuts would total $912 billion over the coming decade. And up to this point, the proposal does not include Trump's suggestion to raise the tax rate on the wealthiest Americans. Also, it does not include Trump's promise to discontinue taxes on tips, as well overtime pay and Social Security retirement benefits. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he wants the House to pass the bill before Memorial Day. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has urged lawmakers to raise the government's debt ceiling by mid-July to avoid a default. And Google will pay the state of Texas $1.4 billion over alleged privacy violations. According to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, the tech giant secretly tracked people's movements, private searches through their products and services. He also said Google tracked people's voice prints and facial geometry. A Google spokesperson said the resolution, quote, settles a raft of old claims, many of which have already been resolved elsewhere concerning product policies we have long since changed. Now, with the U.S. and China agreeing to suspend most tariffs for 90 days, President Trump is unveiling more U.S. investment. President Trump says he spoke with Apple CEO Tim Cook today, who said he would up his numbers. In February, Apple said it would spend $500 billion to expand much of its U.S. operations. This includes assembling AI servers in Houston. Eased tension between the U.S. and China is a benefit to Apple, who makes a majority of its devices in China and relies on the country as its third largest region by sales. Meanwhile, a massive lithium deposit found on the West Coast. This is a key element in the transition to clean energy options. The discovery is bringing potential prosperity and growing apprehension. Here's more.
A vast lithium deposit has been unearthed in the McDermott caldera. This is in the volcanic heart of Oregon and borders Nevada. The value of the site comes in at a staggering $1.5 trillion. A study suggests it could hold up to 40 million metric tons of lithium. This is a critical element in making EV batteries. The McDermott caldera may be one of the largest lithium deposits ever found in the U.S. The discovery is a double-edged sword, though. The deposit could reduce the U.S. dependence on overseas materials and boost local domestic battery production. But local communities and native residents are concerned about the impacts to the environment and sacred grounds. Concerns are compounded by the lithium being trapped in clay stone rather than salt brine, which is more accessible. That means extraction would require intricate extraction techniques. Analysts say with effective extraction, the U.S. would become a top global supplier. Experts expect this would give the U.S. a competitive edge in the battery supply industry.
And a Bitcoin mining company co-founded by Eric Trump is going public. American Bitcoin has agreed to merge with Griffin Digital Mining. The new company will go by American Bitcoin. It's expected to trade on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol ABTC. Trump launched American Bitcoin earlier this year through a partnership with Bitcoin miner Hut 8. And Fox's new streaming service officially has a name, Fox One. Lachlan Murdoch said it's scheduled to launch ahead of football season this fall. But he did not share many details on price. He said Fox One will be in line with its wholesale pricing. Murdoch did, however, note that the company plans to bundle its service. He said Fox is working to partner with other distributors and streaming services. Fox One is set to bring together live streaming and on-demand access to Fox's full portfolio. Murdoch stressed again that the goal of Fox One is not to take from linear TV. Instead, the service is meant to reach viewers who have cut the cord or never paid for cable. And if you've ever owned an Apple device since 2014, you may be eligible for a part of a $95 million class action settlement. The lawsuit accused the tech company's voice assistant Siri of spying on users. The initial suit was filed in 2021 in federal court. Users said their private conversations were being recorded by their devices after Siri was unintentionally activated. Although a settlement was agreed upon, the company has denied the allegations. That's according to a legal notice obtained by USA Today. There's a hearing tentatively scheduled for August to approve the settlement. White House Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett commented on the trade deal with China. Take a listen.
We actually have a fresh start with China. That's the way to think about these negotiations, that we've come in with these reciprocal tariffs. We've described the non-tariff barriers and tariffs that disadvantage American workers, and folks are coming to the table, and it's really stunning how quickly they're moving and how dramatic the changes are. This is obviously 2 days' work, and there's 90 days more work to do to make sure that we land the plane. But, you know, the plane is right there over the runway. I don't think that there's much hope of people who think that this is going to go back. This is absolutely a sound deal.
For more analysis on the U.S.-China trade deal, earlier I spoke to retired Colonel Grant Newsham, senior fellow with the Center for Security and Policy, and he's the author of the book When China Attacks. Take a look. Okay, let's talk about the trade deal. What do you make of the 90-day tariff rollback? Does it signal a path towards de-escalation?
Well, it's a temporary postponement. You'd call it kicking the can down the road. All they've really agreed to do is to lower tariffs and start talking some more. The idea that somehow this is a fresh start and China's turned over a new leaf and we're going to be able to work out our problems, well, there's decades of empirical evidence to suggest that's not the case. You do notice that the Chinese apparently came, as our negotiator said, ready to deal. Well, that ought to tell you one thing, is that China was really suffering from these tariffs. And this is what we often do, is we will actually do something useful, put some pressure on China, get them by the snout, and then let them go, and they come back stronger. So I would expect China to delay, drag their heels on sort of making concessions or changing things. But it's just not the nature of the Chinese Communist regime, that country, or that market, that will suggest that you're really going to work out your differences. At best, this is a pause that makes Wall Street and other people happy. But that's about all I can see coming of this. There will be effort, but don't expect huge changes. We've seen this before.
But China apparently did agree as part of the deal to drop its non-monetary tariff barriers and as well as open its markets. What do you make of that?
Well, in about the 40 years that I've been promising this, every quarter China has announced opening up. And what do they mean this time? It's clear what they need to do. They need to really stop stealing our intellectual property, our technology, abide by the rules they have promised to obey when they joined the World Trade Organization or were allowed into the trade organization, and stop making it their objective to destroy foreign companies, American included, that come into their country, and replace them. So it really requires a fundamental change in the character of this regime that we're dealing with. So regardless of if they promise to do things, well, there really isn't much of a shred. There isn't a shred of evidence that China has ever lived up to its commitments since, say, 2000, when it was given most favored nation status, allowed into the World Trade Organization. So I'm not optimistic about this at all. China simply has to go back and look at the promises it made when it agreed to join the World Trade Organization. Say, for example, when it comes to state support for private companies. Just one example. They should go over that list, and we should help them. We should provide it and just have check blocks after it and say, well, which ones have you lived up to? Now, it's been 25 years almost, and that would be a pretty good starting point for this. But the idea that somehow this is different, well, that's a story we've heard many times before, and this administration should know better, and I think they do.
All right, Colonel, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
Weed killer protected in a second state. Georgia has joined North Dakota in shielding Bayer, the maker of Roundup weed killer. This comes after lawsuits claiming the company failed to warn customers that the product could cause cancer. The Georgia law will take effect on January 1st of next year and doesn't affect existing cases. About 40% of the nearly 200,000 claims filed against Roundup remain outstanding. It's unclear how many of those are in Georgia. And Chipotle is planning on expanding its footprint both in the U.S. and Canada. The Mexican Grill restaurant says it's opening more than 300 locations this year. 15 to 20 of those stores will be open in Canada. 80% of the stores will include a drive-through. Chipotlane for digital orders. Chipotle says 57 company-owned restaurants have already opened during the first quarter of 2025. In its fourth quarter earnings, the company reported a total revenue of more than $11 billion in 2024, an increase of almost 15% from 2023. Britain wants to become an AI superpower, but the creative industry is fighting back for more copyright controls over their work. Hundreds of notable figures in creative industries signed a letter to the Prime Minister urging for more protections. Here's more.
Hundreds of singers, writers, media organizations, and artistic organizations are looking for more copyright protection from artificial intelligence in the UK. A letter was signed by a number of recognizable artists, including Elton John, Dua Lipa, Jessie Ware, Ian McKellen, Kazuo Ishiguro, and Tom Shepard. They signed a letter that was published on Saturday, calling on British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to address gaps in AI copyright law so as to protect artists from artificial intelligence. Britain's march to be an AI superpower has proposed relaxing laws that currently give creators of literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works the right to control the ways their material may be used. The proposed changes would allow AI developers to train their models on any material to which they have lawful access. It would require creators to proactively opt out to stop their work being used. The letter was also signed by designers and media outlets, including major British newspapers and artist organizations. The group is calling on Starmer to back amendments to the Data, Use and Access Bill to ensure developers are transparent with copyright owners about the use of their material to train AI models. The letter follows on from the release of a silent album in February when more than 1,000 musicians, including Kate Bush and Cat Stevens, protested against proposed changes to Britain's copyright laws, which could allow tech firms to train artificial intelligence models using their work. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
The Cannes Film Festival may have just canned the naked dress. Those nearly nude outfits have been a popular way of grabbing attention, but for this year's festival, in the south of France, celebrities getting ready for the red carpet may have to make some adjustments. An amendment was spotted in the Cannes Film Festival dress code only hours ahead of the event's grand opening Tuesday. According to the organizer's website, nudity is prohibited on the red carpet as well as any other area of the festival. The notice said the decision was made, quote, for decency reasons. Staying grounded and hitting the open road. The American Automobile Association estimates close to 40 million Americans will drive this Memorial Day weekend. That's up from last year and the most in 2 decades. Compare that to a small increase expected to fly this year. Around 3.6 million air travel isn't winning Americans over with increased flights for domestic trips. AAA says prices are up 2% this year from last year. The average domestic round-trip ticket totaling about $850. For drivers, on the other hand, oil prices have dropped to a near 4-year low. President Trump signed an executive order to help bring down the cost of prescription drugs. It aims to give Americans the best deal compared to people of other countries buying similar drugs. To do that, his administration will give big pharma companies price targets. NTD's data reporter Kevin Hogan is looking into this. Kevin, how much does Trump expect this order to help? And does the U.S. pay more for medicine than other countries?
President Trump is hoping that this will make a big dent in those prescription drug prices, and Americans do pay more for prescription drugs than people across the world. Now, specifically, President Trump said on Truth Social that he hopes that this executive order can bring drug prices down to about 80% off. So that's a range 30% to 80%. That's his upper bound that he's hoping will help people, Americans, in getting the medicines they need. Trump says that Americans spend 5 to 10 times as many dollars on medicines that other people across the world spend. And he says, so how is he going to do this? Well, price targets, those have been labeled price controls. There's been a little bit of pushback against the use of those, and also cutting out the middleman. And he says that if these companies don't lower their prices, he's going to tell the HHS to take aggressive action on that. Now, let's look at some of the price comparisons for prescription drugs across the world. So you can see in orange, the United States pays more for prescription drugs than a lot of these countries. This is according to the RAND Corporation. It's a nonprofit analysis and research group. They use 2022 data. This is 2024. This was when it was published. And these are wealthy economies that they've sampled. So you can see, for example, the United States, Americans are paying about twice as much as people in Mexico, and the same with Canada, and that keeps rising all the way up to Japan, where Americans are spending almost 3 times as much as the Japanese, right? Now, on average, those 32 wealthy nations, those high-income nations, that's 2.78 times as much Americans are paying for prescription drugs than those other countries, right? So as a result of all this, you might say, well, give me some examples here. Well, let's just take one drug from Johnson & Johnson, Stelara. This is used to treat Crohn's disease. That's a disease of the gut lining. And now, for example, in the United Kingdom, you might pay about $16,000 for a year's supply, whereas in the United States, you're paying $79,000. So this is almost 5 times more than what they pay in the United Kingdom. Now let's look at another example. So you take Bristol-Myers Squibb's Eliquis, right? So this is a blood thinner, helps people to prevent stroke. Okay, so in Canada, you're paying $900 for a year's supply, France, $650, but in the United States, that's $7,100. To give you an example, that's about 11 times as much Americans are paying than people in France for this one particular prescription drug. That said, the CEO of Bristol-Myers Squibb has pushed back on this, saying that this is in stark contrast to many systems outside the United States, which, while they may deliver lower prices, carry an often overlooked trade-off that patients often wait longer for new medicines. So this is Christopher Berner. He's the CEO of Bristol-Myers Squibb. So he's basically saying that Americans do get value while they're paying higher prices because they don't have to wait quite as long. And that's what he told NBC in 2024. Now, when you look at the generic prices, though, that's where Americans actually do pay a little bit less. So if you take for example, you take this RAND study, right? You look at, well, Americans are paying about a third what Canadians pay for the generic drugs, and then that goes up to about half compared to what Germans pay, and they took the average of those 32 wealthy nations, and they found that Americans are paying just a little bit more than half of what people in other countries pay for generic drugs. And generic drugs make up about 90% of the total drug volume consumed in the United States, prescription drugs, but it's just that their costs are so low, so they don't really make a dent in that bigger average, thus Americans are paying more. Now, it is possible that Big Pharma won't take this sitting down, and they may take this to court to put a block on what Trump is doing here. Back to you.
All right, thanks for the numbers, Kevin. And before we go, let's quickly go through markets. U.S. stocks surged today with the S&P 500 actually hitting its highest level since March. And this comes after the U.S. and China agreed to temporarily reduce tariffs for 90 days. And that is, of course, easing fears of a deepening trade war. Investors moved into riskier assets and away from defensive plays. Volatility dropped sharply, and tech and consumer discretionary sectors led gains, with Apple climbing on reports of possible iPhone price hikes. Traders are now watching for upcoming Fed commentary and expecting rate cuts later in the year. And that's it for today on Business Matters.